The sun hung low over the sprawling wilderness of Lyris IV, painting the dense alien foliage in hues of gold and crimson. The wildlife sanctuary stretched endlessly, bordered by shimmering rivers and jagged cliffs. Dr. Elise Grant adjusted her visor, scanning the vibrant expanse with a practiced eye. Lyris IV wasn't Earth, but it had become her home. A paradise of untamed beauty, it was also the heart of her life's work, understanding and protecting the planet's apex predators, the Kralvek. The Kralvek were legendary creatures, their reputation as fierce hunters well earned. Standing over 8 feet tall at the shoulder, with 6 muscular limbs and fur that shimmered like liquid silver, they were unmatched in their domain. But it wasn't just their size or strength that fascinated Elise, it was their intelligence. Her team had observed their pack dynamics, intricate communication patterns, and even what seemed like rituals. Yet, despite years of research, no human had ever gotten close to a Kralvek. They were fiercely territorial, avoiding humans at all costs. Elise had just finished logging notes about a recent sighting when the emergency beacon on her communicator flared to life. "Dr. Grant," came the voice of Miguel, her lead assistant. His tone was urgent. "You need to see this. Northwest quadrant." She grabbed her field kit and jumped into the rover, its sleek frame gliding effortlessly over the uneven terrain. Minutes later, she arrived at the location Miguel had flagged. What she saw made her heart skip a beat. A Kralvek mother lay collapsed in the clearing, her massive frame heaving with shallow breaths. Deep gashes marred her silver fur, and one of her 6 legs hung limp, likely broken. But it wasn't just her injuries that shocked Elise, it was the 2 cubs nestled against her, whining softly. Their wide, golden eyes darted between their mother and the approaching humans. "Stay back," Elise whispered to Miguel, raising a hand. She knelt slowly, keeping her movements deliberate. The mother lifted her head weakly, baring her fangs in a feeble warning. "She's dying," Miguel said softly, his voice tinged with both awe and fear. "Should we call for backup?" "No," Elise replied firmly, her eyes never leaving the Kralvek. "Too many people will spook her. Let me try." Carefully, she opened her field kit, retrieving a vial of regenerative serum and a portable med scanner. "Easy, girl," she murmured, her voice low and soothing. The Kralvek's gaze locked onto hers, piercing and calculating. Elise didn't dare look away. She had read accounts of predators who could sense intent, and at that moment she hoped the mother could see hers. After what felt like an eternity, the Kralvek let out a low rumble, a sound of exhaustion rather than aggression. Elise took it as permission. She edged closer, inch by inch, until she was close enough to press the injector into the mother's flank. The serum hissed softly as it entered her bloodstream. The cubs hissed and snapped at Elise's proximity, their tiny claws swiping at the air. She couldn't blame them, they were terrified. She gently placed a nutrient pack on the ground, sliding it toward them. One of the cubs sniffed hesitantly, then nudged it toward its sibling. "I can't believe this," Miguel muttered behind her. "She came to us. Why would she do that?" Elise shook her head. "I don't know. But whatever drove her here, it's a breakthrough. Predators like this don't seek help, especially not from us." The med scanner beeped softly, displaying a series of injuries. Elise frowned. "She's been in a fight. Most likely with another Kralvek. The broken leg is bad, but the internal bleeding is worse. We need to get her stabilized. Transporting her could kill her," Miguel warned. Elise glanced at the cubs, their fragile forms pressed against their mother's side. "We don't have a choice. If she dies here, they won't survive the night." As the team carefully prepped the mother for transport, a sense of unease settled over Elise. This wasn't normal behavior, not for a predator like the Kralvek. What had driven her to abandon her instincts and approach humans? And what would the rest of her kind think of this unprecedented act? The rover began its slow journey back to the sanctuary, the injured Kralvek secured in a containment field. Elise sat beside her, monitoring her vitals, while the cubs huddled in a crate nearby, emitting soft cries that tugged at Elise's heart. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elise glanced out at the wilderness. Something fundamental had shifted. The arrival of the Kralvek mother wasn't just a moment of survival, it was a message. Whether it was a cry for help or a desperate gamble, Elise knew one thing: they were on the brink of understanding something profound about these creatures. And humanity had just taken its first step into a bond that would redefine their relationship with the wild. The sanctuary buzzed with controlled chaos as Dr. Elise Grant and her team worked to stabilize the Kralvek mother. The sterile lights of the medical bay illuminated her massive, injured form. Despite her weakened state, she occasionally growled low in her throat, her golden eyes following every movement the humans made. "She's strong," Miguel muttered, gently setting a diagnostic monitor against her side. "Most creatures wouldn't have made it this far with these injuries." "She's not just strong," Elise replied, focused on cleaning the deepest gash along the predator's flank. "She's desperate. And that desperation brought her to us." The cubs, temporarily housed in a padded containment pen nearby, whimpered and clawed at the barriers. Their high-pitched cries seemed to affect the mother more than her physical pain. With every sound they made, she twitched, her gaze snapping to the pen. "She won't rest unless she knows they're safe," Elise said, setting her tools down. "Lower the pen barrier." Miguel froze. "Are you serious? If they get loose?" "They're too small to hurt anyone yet," Elise interrupted, her tone firm but calm. "And keeping them separated is stressing her out. We need her calm if she's going to recover." After a hesitant pause, Miguel adjusted the controls and the barrier retracted. The two cubs immediately bolted across the room, skittering on their small claws before reaching their mother. They nestled into her side, their tiny bodies trembling as they pressed into her fur. The mother exhaled a long, rumbling breath, her muscles relaxing for the first time since her arrival. Elise watched the scene unfold, a strange mix of relief and awe washing over her. "She's trusting us," Elise said softly. "Trusting? Or tolerating?" Miguel countered, folding his arms. Elise didn't answer. Trust or not, the Kralvik mother's actions defied everything they thought they knew about the species. Apex predators avoided humans, treating them as threats or prey to be avoided. This act of vulnerability, this surrender, was unprecedented. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The team took shifts monitoring the mother's condition and feeding the cubs a carefully formulated blend of nutrients. Though wary at first, the cubs gradually grew accustomed to Elise's presence. They would sniff her hands, occasionally swatting at her fingers with their small claws. One evening, as the sanctuary settled into its quiet rhythms, Elise sat cross-legged near the enclosure where the family rested. One of the cubs padded toward her, its golden eyes wide with curiosity. It stopped a few feet away, tilting its head. Elise extended her hand slowly, palm up, giving the cub the choice to approach. After a moment of hesitation, it crept closer and nudged her fingers with its snout. A wave of warmth flooded through her. "Well, hello there," she murmured. Miguel watched from a nearby console, shaking his head. "You're getting too attached." "Attachment isn't the problem," Elise replied without looking away. "It's what makes this work. If we can bond with them, maybe we can coexist with them." The cub let out a small, chirping sound, a gesture Elise decided to interpret as approval. By the end of the week, the mother's condition had improved significantly. Her wounds had begun to heal, and she could lift her head to watch the humans come and go. She still growled occasionally, but the growls lacked the menace they once held. But it wasn't just her physical recovery that intrigued Elise. Other Kralvik had started appearing near the sanctuary's perimeter, their glowing eyes visible in the dusk. They didn't attack or threaten, merely watching. "They're observing us," Miguel noted one evening, his binoculars trained on the treeline. "It's like they're waiting for something." Elise leaned against the railing, her gaze fixed on the shadowy forms. "Maybe they're waiting to see if we'll protect her. If we can be trusted. And if we fail?" Elise didn't answer. Failure wasn't an option. Not for the Kralvik mother, her cubs, or the fragile trust they had begun to build. Whatever the Kralvik were waiting for, Elise knew one thing. Humanity was being watched, judged, and, perhaps for the first time, considered. The sanctuary's peaceful rhythm was shattered by the hum of engines. Elise Grant stood on the observation deck, squinting into the distance as a convoy of hover trucks approached the sanctuary gates. Dust kicked up behind the vehicles, and the insignia of Vanguard Mining Corporation gleamed on their sides. "What are they doing here?" Miguel muttered, stepping up beside her. "They're not supposed to be," Elise replied, her stomach tightening. Vanguard had been a growing problem in the region, expanding their operations despite strict regulations meant to protect the planet's ecosystem. The convoy halted at the gates, and a man in a sharp corporate uniform stepped out, flanked by armed guards. Elise recognized him immediately, Daniel Kessler, one of Vanguard's regional managers. Moments later, Kessler and his entourage were escorted into the sanctuary's central hall. Elise met them with crossed arms, Miguel and two other staff members standing behind her. "Dr. Grant," Kessler began with a forced smile. "I hope we're not intruding." "You are," Elise replied bluntly. "This is protected land and you're well aware of that." Kessler's smile didn't falter. I assure you we have no intention of violating any boundaries. However, we've been tracking some unusual activity in the area. Large predators moving closer to human settlements. We're concerned about the safety of our workers. They're moving because you're encroaching on their territory, Elise shot back. If you stayed within your designated zones, there wouldn't be a problem. Kessler ignored her comment, his eyes drifting toward the monitors displaying live feeds of the Kralvek family. His expression shifted to one of calculated interest. Ah, so the rumors are true, he said. You've managed to get close to a Kralvek. Fascinating creatures. Imagine what we could learn if we studied them more directly. Elise stepped in front of the screen, her voice cold. They're not specimens and this isn't your lab. They came to us for help and we're protecting them. Kessler's polite facade cracked, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. Protecting them won't matter if they become a threat. My superiors won't hesitate to authorize preventative measures. Preventative measures? Miguel echoed, his voice rising. You mean killing them? Before Kessler could respond, a low, guttural growl echoed through the sanctuary. The Kralvek mother had risen to her feet, her golden eyes locked on the humans. Her wounds hadn't fully healed, but her posture was unmistakable. She was ready to fight. Looks like she doesn't trust you any more than I do, Elise said. Kessler raised his hands in mock surrender. This isn't over, Dr. Grant. I hope you'll reconsider your priorities before it's too late. That night, the tension in the sanctuary was palpable. Elise's team worked in shifts, monitoring the perimeter for any signs of intrusion. Elise herself couldn't sleep, her mind racing with thoughts of Kessler's veiled threat. At dawn, the threat became real. The alarm blared, jolting Elise awake. She rushed to the observation deck where Miguel was already stationed. What's happening? She demanded. Perimeter breach, Miguel said, pointing to a monitor. The cameras showed 2 Vanguard guards wrestling a Kralvek cub into a containment pod. The mother roared from the enclosure, slamming against the reinforced walls in desperation. Elise's chest tightened with fury. They took one of the cubs. Without hesitation, she grabbed a tranquilizer rifle and headed for the gates. Miguel and 2 other staff members followed, armed with similar non-lethal weapons. When they reached the breach site, the scene was chaos. The mother Kralvek had broken free, tearing through the forest toward the guards. Other Kralvek were emerging from the shadows, their glowing eyes trained on the intruders. We need to get that cub back before this turns into a massacre, Elise said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Miguel nodded. And if they attack us too? They won't, Elise said, gripping her rifle tightly. They know we're here to help. As the humans moved toward the guards, Elise prayed she was right. The forest erupted into chaos as the Kralvek mother charged through the trees, her roars shaking the air. The Vanguard guards scrambled to retreat, dragging the containment pod with the captured cub behind them. The cub's cries cut through the noise, spurring Elise forward. We have to stop them. Elise shouted over the din, gripping her tranquilizer rifle as she sprinted through the undergrowth. Miguel and the other sanctuary staff followed close behind, their faces pale with tension. The mother Kralvek reached the guards first. Her massive body slammed into one of them, sending him sprawling into the dirt. The second guard raised his weapon, a sleek energy rifle, but Elise didn't give him the chance to fire. Drop it, she yelled, aiming her rifle. The guard hesitated, glancing between Elise and the enraged predator. That moment of hesitation was all the Kralvek needed. With a snarl, she lunged forward, knocking the rifle from his hands and pinning him to the ground. Elise ran to the containment pod, her heart pounding. The cub inside whimpered, pressing its small body against the side of the cage. She fumbled with the release mechanism, her hands shaking until the latch clicked open. The cub tumbled out, disoriented but unharmed. It looked up at Elise with wide golden eyes before bounding toward its mother. The Kralvek mother paused her attack, nuzzling the cub protectively as the other predators emerged from the shadows, surrounding the scene. Fall back, one of the guards shouted into a communicator. The remaining Vanguard forces retreated, their plans foiled, leaving behind a trail of equipment and chaos. Back at the sanctuary, Elise and her team worked to calm the Kralvek. The mother allowed herself to be led back into the enclosure, her cubs nestled close to her side. The other predators lingered near the perimeter, watching but not advancing. As the adrenaline faded, Miguel leaned against a console, shaking his head. I can't believe we got out of that alive. We didn't just get out alive, Elise said, her voice quiet but resolute. We earned their trust. She gestured toward the enclosure, where the mother Kralvek had settled into a protective circle around her cubs. For the first time since her arrival, she lay completely still, her golden eyes half closed. "They trusted us enough to let us help," Elise continued. "Even after everything, she knew we weren't the enemy." The fallout from the incident was swift. Elise filed an immediate report with planetary authorities, condemning Vanguard's actions and calling for stricter enforcement of sanctuary protections. Her report was backed by video evidence of the Kralvek's behavior, proof of their intelligence, their capacity for trust, and their willingness to coexist with humans. But the most powerful moment came a few days later. Elise was performing her morning rounds when she noticed something unusual. The Kralvek mother was waiting at the edge of her enclosure, her cubs at her feet. As Elise approached, the mother lowered her massive head, letting out a low rumbling sound that Elise recognized as a gesture of acknowledgement. Elise knelt, her heart pounding as one of the cubs padded forward. It sniffed her hand, then nudged it gently before retreating to its mother's side. Miguel watched from a distance, his expression a mix of awe and disbelief. "I guess they really do trust you." "It's not just me," Elise said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's humanity. They've seen what we're capable of, not just our strength but our compassion." As the Kralvek family rested in the sanctuary, the other predators remained nearby, watching but no longer threatening. A fragile but undeniable bond had formed, one that could redefine humanity's relationship with the wild. Elise stood at the edge of the enclosure, her mind racing with possibilities. The Kralvek had taken the first step, and now it was humanity's turn to prove that this trust was not misplaced. In the quiet of the morning, surrounded by the wilderness of Lyris IV, Elise felt the weight of the moment settle over her. Today they had learned something profound. Even predators, fierce, untamed, and unyielding, could trust humans with their cubs.